Okay, I want you to do something for me. Just look at your phone for a second. Yes. Or your laptop. Maybe it's the smart TV on your wall.
All right, I'm looking.
It looks inert, right? Just a piece of glass and metal. It's how you watch your shows or, check your email.
Mm-hmm.
But if you were a political strategist in 2024, you didn't see a screen. You saw a battlefield. And not just any battlefield. You saw what was probably the most expensive real estate on planet Earth.
And when you say expensive, that's not hyperbole. We are talking about staggering sums of money.
We really are. We're doing a deep dive today into the 2024 election, but not the way you might think. We're not really talking about the speeches or the rallies or even the polls.
Nope. We're going under the hood.
We are talking about the machinery, the invisible billion-dollar engine running underneath it all. We are talking about the money.
Or, as one of our sources so chillingly put it, industrialized narrative control.
That phrase gives me a shiver every time I hear it. Yeah. It's a lot. But let's start with the sticker shock because it's the best place to begin. We finally have the final tally for the total U.S. political ad spending in the 2024 cycle. Do you want to do the honors?
It's a number that is genuinely hard to wrap your head around. It came in at $12.32 billion.
$12.32 billion with a B.
Yeah. And just to give that some context, because billion is one of those words that just kind of floats away.
Yeah.
That's the GDP of a small country.
Right.
It's about what it costs to build a new aircraft carrier. And for our purposes, the most important part is that it's a nearly 30% increase over the 2020 election.
28.9% to be exact. And 2020 was already the most expensive election in history. I mean, we all remember the headlines from back then.
We thought that was the peak, that it couldn't possibly get any higher.
So, okay, the first reaction, and I think this is what most people listening are probably thinking, is, simple economics. Inflation. Everything costs more. A gallon of milk costs more. Gas costs more. So buying a 30-second ad on the evening news just costs more. Is that what this is? Is this just inflation?
That's the easy answer, right? It's the comforting answer. It feels logical. But if you actually dig into the breakdown, and we've got this really comprehensive stack of reports here from Tech for Campaigns, eMarketer, the Wesleyan Media Project, that whole inflation argument, it falls apart really fast.
How so?
Well, if it were just inflation, you'd expect to see the spending rise pretty evenly across the board. TV ads cost 20% more, radio ads cost 20% more, direct mail costs 20% more.
Everything just gets a bit more expensive proportionally.
Exactly. But that's not what we saw at all.
Yeah.
What we saw was a completely lopsided explosion. We saw spending in specific technologies jump by like 500%, while others just kind of stayed flat.
So this wasn't about things just getting more expensive. This was a deliberate choice, a change in what they were buying.
It was a fundamental shift in how democracy is sold. And I think we have to use that word sold very deliberately here.
It feels appropriate, and that really is the mission for this deep dive.
Mm-hmm.
We want to peel back the layers of that $12 billion. We're going to look at where it went, who spent it, and frankly, who wasted it.
Oh, there was so much waste. Billions in waste. It's actually, it's kind of painful to look at the inefficiency detailed in some of these reports.
I bet. And we're absolutely going to get to what one report calls the strategy gap, which honestly, that was one of the most surprising things I read preparing for this. The idea that one side spent significantly less money, but may have actually won the information war years before a single vote was even cast.
It's this clash of philosophies. It's the always-on mobilization strategy versus the seasonal sprint persuasion model.
Right. And we'll get into the weeds on that, but I think you're right. We have to start with the technology because 2024 really feels like the year the dam finally broke on digital advertising in politics.
It's been cracking for a while, but yeah, this was the flood.
Let's talk about that dam because for 50, 60 years, political campaigning was pretty simple. You shake hands, you kiss babies, and you buy a bunch of TV ads on the 6 o'clock news.
The linear TV model, the tried and true.
And looking at these 2024 numbers, that old dinosaur, it's not extinct yet, not by a long shot.
No, that dinosaur is actually still quite fat and happy. Traditional media, and by that we mean broadcast TV like your local NBC or ABC affiliate, cable news like CNN and Fox, and radio, that slice of the pie still took the lion's share.
What was the number on that?
About $6 billion.
So almost $9 billion still went to the old school way of doing things.
Yeah, habits die hard. And to be fair, there's a reason for it. Older voters who are consistently the most reliable voting bloc.
They still watch linear TV.
They still watch linear TV. If you want to reach a 65-year-old retiree in suburban Pennsylvania, you buy a slot during Wheel of Fortune.
Yeah.
That part of the equation hasn't really changed.
Okay, but the growth isn't there. That's the key. That $9 billion is a big number, but it's not the future.
The growth is flat. All the action, all the heat, the revolution, if you want to call it that, it was all in digital. Digital spending absolutely spiked 156% over 2020 levels.
Wow.
We're talking about $3.6 billion being funneled directly into our phones, our tablets, and our laptops.
156% growth in just 4 years. I mean, if that were a stock, you'd be the darling of Wall Street.
And here's the really wild part. Even with that massive jump, politics is still lagging way behind the commercial world.
Lagging? How can you spend $3.5 billion and be lagging?
Because if you look at the big commercial advertisers, your Nikes, your Fords, your Procter & Gamble's, they're allocating something like 78% of their total budgets to digital.
78%.
They know that's where the eyeballs are. They know people aren't sitting through commercial breaks on live TV anymore. But politics, even with this massive spike, they're only sitting at around 36% digital.
So why the gap? That seems crazy to me. I usually think of political campaigns as being these cutthroat, hyper-efficient operations. Why are they so slow to move the money to where people are actually looking?
I think it's a mix of a few things. Old habits, for one. Consultant fees are a big part of it. The commission structure for traditional TV ad buys is very, very lucrative for political consultants.
Follow the money.
Always. But there's also just a deep-seated risk aversion. No campaign manager wants to be the person who decided not to buy TV and then lost the election. It's just safer to do what's always been done.
The old, nobody ever got fired for buying IBM.
Exactly. Or in this case, nobody gets fired for buying a spot on the 6 o'clock news.
Yeah.
But in 2024, one specific piece of technology basically forced their hand.
Mm.
And this, for me, this was the real aha moment in all the research.
What was it?
Connected TV.
CTV.
CTV. The game changer.
Okay, let's define this properly, because I think I know what it is, but the term can be a little fuzzy. When I hear connected TV, I'm just thinking, well, my TV is plugged into the wall, so it's connected. But we're talking about something very specific here in the ad world.
We are. It's a great point. CTV refers to any television content that is streamed over the internet. So if you're watching, say, The Handmaid's Tale on Hulu, and you're watching it through your Roku stick.
That's CTV.
That's CTV. If you're on your big Samsung Smart TV and you open the YouTube app to watch a video, that's CTV. Watching the NFL on Amazon Prime through your PlayStation.
Also CTV, so it's basically TV content, but delivered like a website instead of through a cable box.
You got it. And the spending growth here it's just absurd. It grew 506.3% compared to 2020.
Hold on, say that again.
506%.
500%. That's not a trend. That's a tidal wave. That's a paradigm shift.
It went from being this little niche experiment, I think it was around $200 million in 2020, to a $1.56 billion behemoth in 2024.
Okay, so why? What makes CTV so special that campaigns decided to just dump $1.5 billion into it all of a sudden?
Well, there were two main drivers. The first was a big event. The 2024 Olympics, that was huge. Everyone was streaming the games on different platforms, and that opened up a ton of premium ad inventory.
Right, a captive audience.
A huge one. But the real underlying reason is a single word: addressability.
Okay, explain that like I'm 5. Or maybe explain it like I'm a voter who is just so tired of seeing political ads.
Okay. Let's think about traditional TV again. When a campaign buys an ad on the 6 o'clock news in, say, Philadelphia, they're broadcasting to the entire Philadelphia designated market area.
The whole region.
The whole region. That includes the city, the suburbs, and rural areas 3 counties over. You're hitting Democrats, Republicans, people who never vote, teenagers who can't vote. It's a shotgun blast.
You just spray and pray you hit your target.
And you pay for every single one of those eyeballs, even if 80 or 90% of them are completely irrelevant to your campaign. It's incredibly wasteful.
Enter CTV.
Enter CTV. Because that Roku stick or that smart TV is connected to the internet, it has an IP address. And because of the vast universe of data brokers, that IP address can be linked to a specific household identity.
And this is where it starts to get a little bit creepy.
It's the nature of the beast, unfortunately. They can take that IP address and match it to a voter file from the state. So they know that the household watching through that specific Roku stick is registered as independent, that they voted in the last midterm election, And maybe that they subscribe to outdoor magazines.
So they can go to the ad platform and say, I want to show this specific 30-second ad only to households that look exactly like this.
Yes. They can target, with the precision of a Facebook ad, I want suburban women aged 35 to 50 who are undecided, but they can serve that ad on the biggest, most beautiful screen in the house with the sound on in high definition.
Wow.
It combines the emotional power and impact of a classic TV commercial with the sniper scope precision of digital targeting.
So in theory, my next door neighbor and I could be watching the exact same episode of the same show on Hulu at the exact same time. But during the commercial break, I see an ad for a pickup truck, and he sees an ad for a political candidate.
That is exactly how it works. And that efficiency, that lack of waste, is why the money just flooded in. But you knew there was a but coming.
I was sensing a very large but.
The technology is incredible. The strategy behind using it,
Yeah.
not so much.
And this is what the Tech for Campaigns report called the strategic blunder.
It is. And it's actually kind of funny if you stop and think about it. You have these campaigns spending $1.5 billion on this revolutionary cutting-edge tech, and then you look at what they actually put on the screen.
Let me guess. It's just the same old TV ad, right?
They treated CTV as just TV on a different device. They took the standard cookie-cutter 30-second spot, the one candidate Smith walking through a factory in a hard hat, shaking hands in slow motion, American flag waving in the background.
The one we've seen since the 1980s.
That's the one. And they just uploaded it directly to streaming platforms.
Which feels incredibly jarring. When you're used to the flow of streaming content, a traditional TV ad just sticks out like a sore thumb.
It does. It completely ignores how people consume content on these platforms. On YouTube, for example, even on a big TV screen, people are used to a much faster pace. They're used to a certain authenticity.
The YouTuber aesthetic, you mean?
Right. Jump cuts, talking directly to the camera, maybe a more casual tone. The data is pretty damning. It shows that 49 cents of every single presidential campaign dollar went to these generic, traditional TV-style ads. They didn't adapt the creative at all.
And you can contrast that with how a company like, say, Meta or Google advertises themselves on other platforms.
Oh, it's night and day. When Meta runs an ad campaign on YouTube Shorts, the ad looks and feels like a YouTube short. It's native to the platform. It fits. Political campaigns were essentially trying to force a square peg into a round hole to the tune of $1.5 billion.
So they bought all this expensive new inventory, but they didn't respect the medium they were buying on.
It's the perfect example of inefficiency masked as innovation. Hey, look, we're being monitored. We're spending on streaming. That's great. What are we showing them? The same ad we showed their grandparents on NBC in 1992.
Which brings us to the players on the field. Because while everyone was, to some degree, wasting money on bad creative, there was a massive disparity in just how much money was being burned in the first place. The partisan spending divide in 2024 was, well, it was historic.
It really was. I mean, if you were just a casual observer looking at the bank accounts, you would have bet the house on the Democrats. No question.
Let's walk through those numbers because they're pretty stark.
Okay, so in the presidential race alone, just looking at the top of the ticket, Democrats outspent Republicans by $400 million.
$400 million. That is an enormous war chest advantage. That's more than most campaigns spend in their entire cycle.
It's a huge number. And if you drill down into the big digital platforms, what we call the duopoly of Google and Meta, the gap is even wider. The data shows that by August of 2024, pro-democratic spending on those two platforms was roughly $184 million.
Okay, $184 million for the Dems. What about the Republicans?
Pro-Republican spending was about $59 million.
Wow, that's nearly 3-to-1.
It's a 3-to-1 advantage. And in the traditional world political science, that should be a knockout blow. The conventional wisdom is that the candidate with the most money wins. Money buys name recognition. Money buys turnout. Money buys everything.
But obviously, the election results tell us that money isn't a magic wand. Something else was going on.
And this is where the conversation has to pivot from the how much to the how. Because the experts arguing in these reports, they suggest that the Republicans, and the Trump campaign specifically, didn't necessarily have a money problem. They just had a completely different philosophy about what advertising is even for.
This is that concept you mentioned earlier, the always-on versus the boom and bust model.
Right. And to really understand this, you can't just look at 2024. You have to look at what was happening when there wasn't an election.
The off years. 2021, 2022, 2023.
The so-called boring years. The data from Meta is fascinating. It shows that right-wing advocacy groups, and we're talking about the whole conservative ecosystem here, they decreased their spending on Facebook and Instagram by only 3% during those off years.
Wait, hold on. Let me make sure I heard that right. Only 3%. So they basically kept the lights on at full brightness, even when nobody was actively voting for a federal office.
Essentially, yes. They never went away. They viewed persuasion not as a sales pitch you make in October of an election year, but as a relationship you have to maintain every single day. They kept the conversation going. They kept sharing their articles, their videos, their memes. They stayed in the feed constantly.
They were farming, tending the soil year-round.
An excellent analogy. They were farming. Now, you compare that to the Democratic strategy, which the Tech for Campaigns report calls the seasonal sprint. Left-wing organizations and affiliated groups slashed their spending by 75% during those same off years.
75%. They just went dark.
They went completely dormant. They let the fields go fallow. And then, when 2024 rolled around, they tried to flood the zone with hundreds of millions of dollars to make up for all that lost time.
So from the voter's perspective, you have one side that's a constant low-level presence in your life. They're a part of your daily information diet, shaping how you see the world. And then the other side just shows up every 4 years, screaming through a megaphone, "Hey, remember us? The world is ending. You have to vote right now."
It's the difference between a friend who calls you every week just to check in and a friend who only ever calls you when they need help moving.
That is a brutal comparison. But it really makes sense why the cost of persuading a vote would be so much higher for the Democrats. They have to reacquire your attention from scratch every single time.
Exactly. The Republicans, by staying engaged, built what the industry calls an owned audience. And this is such a crucial concept for anyone trying to understand modern media.
It's the difference between an owned audience and a rented audience.
Perfect. If you have to pay Mark Zuckerberg or Google every single time you want to deliver a message to a voter, you are renting that voter's attention. That is an expensive, inefficient way to operate.
But if that voter voluntarily follows your page or subscribes to your YouTube channel or signs up for your email list and shares your content for free,
that's an owned audience. You can reach them whenever you want for free. It dramatically lowers your cost per engagement.
And the sources are pretty clear that the right has built a massive structural advantage here.
Massive. Just look at the media ecosystem they've built. You have these huge entities like PragerU and the Daily Wire. These aren't just little political operations. They are full-blown professional media companies.
And their reach is enormous.
The numbers are stark. Combined, PragerU and the Daily Wire have twice the number of Instagram followers and 1.5 times the number of YouTube subscribers as their top left-wing equivalents.
So places like Courier Newsroom or now this Impact.
Right. And that's just the main brand accounts. If you start to include the personalities, the actual hosts and pundits who work for the Daily Wire, people like Ben Shapiro or Matt Walsh, the gap on a platform like Instagram widens to 8-to-1.
8 times the organic reach, without spending a single dollar on an ad.
So think about that. Well, the Democrats are spending that extra $400 million just desperately trying to buy their way back into people's feeds.
The Republicans are reaching millions of people organically for free because they spent the last 4 years building the pipes to deliver their message.
It really challenges this idea that fundraising is the ultimate metric of a campaign's health. We always see those headlines, right? Candidate X raises $50 million in August, and we all think, wow, they must be winning.
But if they have to spend that entire $50 million just to achieve the same level of reach that the other side is getting for free,
then they're not winning at all. They're just paying a tax for not having built an audience in the first place.
So let's get into the tactics of how that money was actually used. Because it's not just that they had an audience, it's what they asked that audience to do. Even the ads they did buy were fundamentally different. This brings us to mobilization versus persuasion.
This seems like a technical distinction, but from reading the reports, it really feels like this was the decisive strategic factor of the entire election.
So how do the reports define those terms?
It's pretty straightforward. Persuasion is what we traditionally think of as a political ad.
Yeah.
It's trying to change your mind. It's an ad designed to convince you that candidate A is better than candidate B, or that issue X is the most important thing.
And mobilization.
Mobilization is pure logistics. It's GOTV, get out the vote. The ad isn't trying to change your mind about who to vote for. It assumes you're already on their side. Its only goal is to get you to take an action. Go here to register. Click here for your polling place. Vote early on this date.
Okay, so how did the two presidential campaigns split their digital ad budgets between those two goals?
This is where the Trump campaign, and interestingly, Elon Musk's America PAC, showed incredible message discipline. On Meta, so that's Facebook and Instagram, the Trump campaign spent 41% of its budget, specifically on mobilization ads.
41%. Almost half of their entire Meta budget was just about getting people who already supported them to actually go and vote.
And America PAC, Musk's group, they were even more focused. 83% of their Meta spend was on mobilization.
83%. That's basically all they were doing.
They treated Facebook not as a debate stage or a persuasion platform, but as a utility, a tool. Its job was to drive an immediate, measurable action. Click this button to vote. Share this with 3 friends who need to register.
Okay, so what about the Harris campaign?
It was a completely different picture. Only 13% of the Harris campaign's Meta budget went to mobilization.
Wow, 13 versus 41. That's a massive philosophical difference.
It's a chasm. The Democrats focused heavily on persuasion in their digital ads, right up to the end. But remember our earlier point about the always-on game.
Right. Persuasion is a marathon.
It's a marathon. The experts in these reports argued that persuasion is incredibly difficult to do in a short sprint. If you haven't been shaping someone's worldview for 3 years with your owned media, trying to suddenly change their mind with a 30-second ad in October is a very expensive, very low probability bet.
So the Republican strategy was essentially use the years between the elections for the slow burn persuasion. That's the Daily Wire content, the PragerU videos, the whole culture war ecosystem, and then use the actual election year for mobilization.
Precisely. They farmed year-round, and then they harvested in November. The Democrats, by contrast, tried to plant the seeds, water the crops, and harvest all in the last 3 months.
And you can't farm like that.
Not if you want to win, no. And this brings us to the platforms themselves, because where you choose to plant your message matters just as much as when you do it.
We've been throwing around the names Meta and Google a lot. Are they still the absolute, undisputed kings of the hill in this space?
They are the duopoly. There is no close third. Between them, they captured the vast majority of all digital political spend. The total was over $619 million combined by August of 2024. But they serve very different purposes in a campaign strategy.
Okay, break that down for me. If I'm a campaign manager with $1 million to spend on digital, why am I giving some to Google and some to Meta? What's the difference?
Google, for these purposes, is primarily YouTube. That's where you go for broad issue advocacy and longer form content. If you have a powerful 3-minute video about the economy or a documentary-style attack ad that needs time to build a case, you put that on YouTube.
It's the modern version of the broadcast TV ad.
That's a great way to put it. And their revenue showed it. Google's political ad revenues were up 215% from 2020. It's a broadcast tool for the digital age.
And Meta?
Meta is the engine room. It's Facebook and Instagram. That's where the small dollar fundraising happens. And it's the primary tool for that targeted mobilization we were just talking about. You don't go to Facebook to sit and watch a 10-minute speech. You go there to scroll.
So the ads need to be different.
They need to be punchy, direct, and action-oriented. Donate $5. Register to vote. Find your polling place. It's a direct response machine.
What about the others? I feel like every time I open the news, someone is writing another think piece about how this was the TikTok election.
TikTok. The white whale of political advertising.
Because everyone's on it, but you can't actually buy an ad.
That's it, exactly. TikTok's official policy is that it does not allow paid political advertising. You cannot give them money to promote your candidate, period.
So all that talk about the TikTok election, that wasn't about paid advertising at all.
No, that was entirely organic. That was about influencer marketing, user-generated content, and viral moments. And again, who does that kind of environment favor?
The side with the owned audience. The side that has a built-in network of creators and influencers who will make and share content for free because they believe in the cause.
It goes right back to the ecosystem. If you can't buy the ad space, you have to win the culture on the platform.
Okay, what about X, the platform formerly known as Twitter? They opened the doors back up to political ads.
They did. They re-allowed political ads in late 2022 after Musk's takeover. But the money just didn't really follow. They only attracted about $24 million in total political ad spend.
$24 million in a $12 billion election. That's a rounding error.
It really is.
Yeah.
The consensus in these reports is that X is where journalists talk to other journalists and political junkies talk to each other. It's where the narrative is shaped among the elites, but it's not where you go to reach that undecided swing voter in Wisconsin.
And Snapchat.
Snapchat was surprisingly effective for its niche. It pulled in about 27 million, so slightly more than X, and that was spent mostly by Democrats, and it was almost entirely focused on youth mobilization and voter registration. It's a very specific tool for a very specific demographic.
I want to touch on something a bit technical that came up in the eMarketer report, the cookieless future. It sounds like a bad diet plan, but I know it kept a lot of digital strategists up at night in 2024.
It was the sword of Damocles hanging over the entire digital advertising industry. For 20 years, the internet is basically run on third-party cookies. These are the little trackers that follow you from website to website.
The reason that when you look at a pair of shoes on Amazon, you suddenly see an ad for those exact same shoes on a news website 10 minutes later.
That's the cookie at work. And Google, which controls the Chrome browser, has been threatening to kill them off for years.
They delayed it again, right?
They did. They delayed the final deprecation to 2025. But the threat of it, the writing on the wall, forced a massive pivot in campaign strategy in 2024. Marketers knew that the old way of tracking people across the web was dying. Voters are becoming more vigilant about data privacy. Apple has locked down tracking on iPhones. The whole system is changing.
So how did the campaigns adapt? What do you do when the cookies go away?
You have to pivot toward what's called first-party data.
Meaning the data and the lists that you own yourself?
Exactly. Your email lists, your lists of cell phone numbers from people who opted in at rallies, your donor lists. If you have the voters' direct contact information, you don't need a cookie to find them online. You can just upload your list directly to Facebook or Google and say, find these specific people for me.
Which, once again, brings us back to the always-on strategy. If you've spent the last 4 years carefully collecting emails and phone numbers, you're sitting on a goldmine of first-party data. You're safe.
You're future-proof. But if you're trying to build a list from scratch in July of the election year,
you're in big trouble. You're basically flying blind in this new cookieless world.
It's a huge disadvantage.
Okay, speaking of flying blind, let's talk about the money we can't see. We've been citing all these very precise numbers, 12.32 billion, 184 million, but there is a huge, huge chunk of this iceberg that is completely underwater.
The shadow economy.
Dark money. It sounds so sinister, like something out of a Batman movie, but it's a very real technical term.
It is. And 2024, yet again, set a new record. Dark money, which is technically defined as spending by groups that do not have to disclose their donors, hit $1.9 billion in federal races alone.
Nearly $2 billion of secret money influencing our elections.
And a huge portion of that has moved online, where it's even harder to track. The Wesleyan Media Project was able to track about $300 million in documented dark money spending on the major platforms, but that's just what they could verify.
So who are the big players here? Who is spending all this untraceable cash?
It's important to note it's happening on both sides of the aisle. On the Republican side, you have major groups like One Nation, which is focused on winning Senate races. They spend about $123 million. You have the American Action Network, which focuses on the House. They spend around $69 million.
And on the Democratic side?
You had their counterparts like House Majority Forward, which has been about $61 million. But then you have these really massive, complex networks. We have to talk about Arabella Advisors and its flagship, the 1630 Fund.
I've definitely heard that name before, the 1630 Fund.
Open Secrets calls it a liberal dark money behemoth. It's not a single group so much as a fiscal sponsor for dozens, if not hundreds, of other smaller groups. They move hundreds of millions of dollars through these various channels to support progressive causes and candidates.
And the central issue here isn't just that this money exists, it's the transparency gap, correct?
That is the real danger to the system. Look, if a Super P buys a TV ad on CBS, there's a federal law. They have to file a report with the FCC. We know who bought the ad, when it aired, and how much it cost. It's all public record.
But digital's different.
It's the Wild West. Digital transparency is largely voluntary. Now, to their credit, Facebook and Google have created public ad libraries, which is great. That's how we have a lot of the data we're talking about today.
Yeah.
But what about ads on Reddit? What about ads on Truth Social or Telegram?
Or what about just paying an influencer directly?
That's the huge gray area. If a campaign pays a micro-influencer $500 to make a TikTok video saying, "I love this candidate," does that show up in an FEC report as an advertisement? Or does it get buried in a line item called consulting services?
Or digital strategy.
Exactly. It's incredibly difficult to track. So when we say $1.9 billion in dark money, we all have to understand that that is likely a significant underestimate. We are moving toward a world where a huge percentage of the political persuasion you see is paid for by people you don't know through channels you can't track.
That is deeply unsettling. It feels like we're losing the ability to even know who is trying to manipulate us, let alone why.
We are. And that's why understanding the mechanisms, why these deep dives are so important. You have to be able to see the machinery.
I want to shift gears to something a little more practical, maybe even optimistic. We've talked a lot about the presidential race, but most of the government isn't the president. It's our local representatives, our state legislators, the city council.
The down ballot races.
Right. Does all this high-tech digital wizardry actually matter for them? Or are they still just out there putting signs on lawns and shaking hands at the diner?
Oh, it matters. In fact, you could argue that digital advertising matters more for them than it does for the president. And it all comes down to one word: efficiency.
Explain that. Why is a Facebook ad better for a state Senate candidate than a TV ad?
Let's use an example. Let's say you are running for state legislature in a single district in a suburb of Dallas. Your district might have, say, 50,000 registered voters.
Okay.
If you decide to buy a TV ad on the local Dallas news station, you are paying to broadcast your message to the entire Dallas-Fort Worth metroplex. That's millions of people.
But only a tiny, tiny fraction of them actually live in your district and can vote for you.
Exactly. The sources estimate that in a typical state legislative race, somewhere between 70 and 85% of a TV ad buy reaches people who cannot vote for that candidate.
You are literally burning 85 cents of every dollar you spend.
You are lighting it on fire. And candidates do it because they want the prestige of being on TV and because it's what their consultants know how to do.
But digital can fix this problem.
Digital is a surgical knife. You don't have to buy the whole Dallas market. You can target just the specific zip codes that are in your district. Or better yet, you can upload the actual voter file for your district and say, only show this ad to these 50,000 people.
The waste goes to zero.
The waste goes almost to zero. And the data bears this out. The Tech for Campaigns report found that digital is between 14 and 65 times more cost-effective for reaching in-district voters compared to broadcast TV.
65 times. That's not an incremental improvement.
And it's not even a contest. The report basically says if you're a local candidate and you're still buying broadcast TV, you are committing campaign malpractice. And it's cheaper on a pure cost basis, too.
What are the numbers on that?
The average CPM, that's the cost per thousand impressions on Meta, was about $16.47. For broadcast TV, the average CPM was $43.35.
So it's more precise and it's cheaper.
More precise, cheaper, and, as we're learning, more effective. Because the smart money down ballot isn't just moving to digital ads, it's moving to digital influencers.
There's a stat here in the report that just jumped off the page at me. Ads that used influencer content, so content from trusted local voices, saw a 42% higher engagement rate than standard, polished ad creative.
That stat validates this entire conversation we've been having about the owned audience and the ecosystem. It's about trust. People don't trust institutions anymore. They don't trust the slick ad on the TV screen. They don't trust the politician in the perfect suit.
But they do trust the local mom who runs the community Facebook group.
Or the local barber who has a big Instagram following. Or the head of the local teachers union who posts videos on YouTube. If that person looks into their phone camera and says, hey, everyone, this local proposition is really good for our schools, that just lands in a completely different way.
It feels like the central theme of 2024 was trust. Who do you trust? The 30-second ad that interrupts your show? Or the voice in your social media feed that you've been listening to for years?
And that leads us to the final, broader cultural context. Because this battle isn't just being fought in 30-second ad slots. It's being fought in the content we consume every day. We mentioned the Daily Wire earlier, but we should also look at the other side of that coin.
The soft power aspect of this.
Right. For decades, the Democrats have had a massive, almost uncontested advantage in cultural influence. Hollywood, the music industry, mainstream media. And you can see that strategy continue with something like Higher Ground Productions.
The Obamas company.
Exactly. The Obamas didn't just retire and go away. They started a major production company. They have massive deals with Netflix. They produced American Factory, which won an Academy Award. They produced The G Word, a series about the importance of government functions.
But those aren't campaign ads. You don't see a Vote Democrat bumper at the end of American Factory.
No, and that's the whole point. It's more subtle and arguably more powerful. It shapes the worldview. It's content about the importance of labor, the complexities of global industry, the nobility of public service. That is soft power.
And the argument in these reports is that Republicans realized they were being completely outgunned in that space.
They realized they were locked out of Hollywood, so they decided to build their own parallel ecosystem. Daily Wire making feature films, PragerU creating educational videos, even the acquisition of a platform like X by Elon Musk can be seen through this lens. They are building their own Hollywood to counter the prevailing narrative.
So it's become an arms race of narrative. One side creates award-winning documentaries for Netflix. The other creates daily podcasts and explainer videos on YouTube that get millions of views.
It's industrialized narrative control in its purest form. We are moving toward a world where political marketing rivals major corporate advertising, not just in the amount of money spent, but in its sophistication and its pervasiveness.
Okay, so let's bring it all home. We started this deep dive with a number. $12.32 billion. We saw a 500% explosion in connected TV. We saw this deep strategic split between Republican always-on mobilization model and the Democratic persuasion sprint model. What's the final summary here? What changed in 2024?
I think the summary is that 2024 was the turning point. It was the year that the always-on strategy was definitively proven to be superior. It showed that persuasion is a marathon, not a sprint. The Republicans spent less money overall, but they spent it smarter. They focused heavily on mobilization on platforms like Meta, leveraging an audience they had spent years building.
While the Democrats focused heavily on last-minute persuasion, which is expensive and inefficient.
They paid a massive sprint tax for being late to the party and for not having that built-in media ecosystem.
So what does all of this mean for the listener? For you sitting at home, why should you care about ad spending and CPMs and mobilization tactics?
You should care because your feed is a battlefield. The information you see is being curated. You aren't just seeing random ads. You are being targeted by a surgical machine that is designed to do one of two things: either get you to the polls or change your fundamental beliefs about the world. And a lot of the time, you don't even know that it's happening.
And with the rise of AI-generated content, which we barely even had time to touch on, this is only going to get faster, more personal, and much, much harder to spot.
It is. But I want to leave you with one final provocative thought to chew on.
I'm ready. Hit me.
If the always-on strategy is the clear winner, if farming your audience year-round is the only way to reliably win elections now, will we ever see a break in political advertising again?
Oh, man. I was really hoping for a break after this last cycle.
Think about it. If the big lesson every political consultant takes from 2024 is whatever you do, don't stop spending in the off years, then the campaign simply never ends. Are we looking at a future where American life is just one perpetual 365-day-a-year campaign?
A future where every single piece of content you consume, from a Netflix documentary to a YouTube short to a meme your aunt shares on Facebook, is a calculated part of a persuasion machine.
A forever campaign.
That is an exhausting thought. But also, it feels probably true.
It's the new reality.
Well, on that cheerful note, thank you for diving deep with us into the billion-dollar battleground. We hope you look at all of your screens just a little bit differently now.
Stay curious.
We'll catch you on the next one.